All right, all right. Welcome to this episode of the Dr. Kiki Ramsey Show, where we're going to be talking about getting unstuck. Now, listen, this is a topic that is needed. It's necessary. I've been talking to a lot of my clients over the past couple of weeks, and a lot of people are just feeling really stuck in their lives. And so I really wanted to come on to the show today and address this really specific topic because I think it's going to help all of us. Because let me just tell you, I've been stuck in my life more times than I want. So I understand it so very well. So we're going to get into it right after this. Hey, y'all. Thank you, Jordan, for joining me on this episode of the Dr. Kiki Ramsey Show. If you are here joining me live, go ahead and drop your name in the chat because I'd love to hear from you and hear where you're tuning in from. And if you have questions live, go ahead and drop those in the chat as well as we are talking about this topic today. All right. So we're talking about all about getting unstuck. And let me just say this to you. If you're human, at some point, you've probably been stuck in your life. Now, let me just say this. I understand that some of us are don't stay there as long as other people, but some people can get stuck and be there for enormous amounts of time. And what this does is it keeps you from doing all of the other amazing things that you are supposed to do for yourself in your life. And so I have been talking to clients and just even friends and family and realizing that so many of us are either dealing with being stuck, dealing with having been stuck recently, or don't get stuck in the future. Just saying, right? We've all been there at some point. And so I really wanted to dig into this topic. And so let's talk about being stuck. What is the real definition of it in the first place? It's really that feeling or that sensation of not being able to see where you want to be at in the future, right? It's really a place where you feel like you don't necessarily know your direction. You don't know if you're supposed to go left or right, up or down the street, up the street. You just don't really know. And so many of us can really feel this way in our lives. And when we get there, when we feel this sensation of like paralyzation, we just a, a lot of us we just don't do anything, right? Because when we are stuck, research says that we really don't understand and just know the next direction. But the truth is, we really do, right? As a coach and a psychologist, I firmly believe that we really do have it in us to know the direction that we want to go. We might just necessarily need help to get there, but there's always a direction. But here's the thing about being stuck: when you're stuck and you do nothing, you're still doing something. You're doing something, which means you're staying put, which is something that is not serving you best, especially if you want to get from A to where you want to be, right? And so that whole stuckness that we feel in the moment can be very paralyzing to us as to where we can't really function properly in life in order to move forward doing the things that we want to do and doing the things that we know we should be doing. And so let's jump in. First of all, some reasons why we may feel stuck in our lives. So the first reason you may feel stuck is because you're stressed, overwhelmed, and you're burnout. I talk to so many, women lately who are stressed, overwhelmed, and burnout. And we are burnout for all different kind of reasons. One of the persons and clients that I talked to is she was burnt out because she was a caregiver, right? Hello, Donna. Thanks for joining us from Baltimore. Good to see you. And so we were having this, conversation, and she was really burnt out because she was a caregiver, right? And she was stressed out, and her mom actually had recently passed, but the stress of just taking care of her estate and everything that came with just losing a loved one, but also losing a parent can cause you overwhelm. But if any of you have ever been caregivers in your life, you understand caregiving is not easy. And my heart goes out to you if you are a caregiver or if you've ever been a caregiver in your life. And that is many of us right now who are really caring for our loved ones because guess what? We care. But that doesn't mean that you're not stressed out or overwhelmed because of caregiving, right? Another reason why this stress and overwhelm can be in your life is due to your job. Many of us are working longer hours, we're working harder because we're working from home, and the boundaries of work and home are very, very much mixed up, right? They're very much mixed up. If you are anything like me, I'm here in the podcast, the Dr. Kiki Ramsey Show studio, which is also my office, aka which is also my front living room. Right? So, so when my kids are home, I can see them, right? Like it's just the lines between work and home are very much intertwined these days. And so that can be super, super stressful. I mean, just yesterday, my sister was here. She's gone. Hi, April. She just left and she was here because we went to the spa. We needed some days off. I needed a day off. I needed to take some time for myself and just be and do me. And that's exactly what we did yesterday because work is always still very much stressful. So there's so many reasons why you can feel stressed and overwhelmed, but being stressed and overwhelmed is a reason why many of us feel stuck. We feel stuck in our lives. Another reason is that you compare yourselves to others, right? Mm, like I'm telling you, as a um as a speaker, as a positive psychologist and an executive coach, and just being out on social media and just looking at all the wonderful and amazing things people are doing, I've gotten caught in this trap before in my life. And when you get caught in the trap of comparison, it will send you spiraling, right? And I've had friends and I've coached people on how to overcome this comparison that we do to ourselves. Because what you're saying is when you compare yourselves to others, you say to yourself, they're doing it better than me. I'm not as good as they are. And that is just not the truth, right? We are all equally beautiful in our own strengths, but we have to believe that. But when we sit down and we compare ourselves, especially apples to apples or oranges to oranges, we then become overwhelmed, we then become stressed, and then we become stuck because we think that this is the only right way to do a thing. And you and I both know, let me tell you a secret. There is no one right way to do a thing. There's probably 1,000 ways to do a thing right. It depends on you, but that can have you stuck. Another way is you fear change. Change is one of those things that so many people fear, and I understand why, because most of us, we like things to be in order. I always say I want things to be in decency and in order. But when things are not in decency and order and things are actually changing, it really causes fear in us because we think that because a thing changes, we automatically think of the bad, right? Most human beings will think of the glass half empty versus half full. Our brains are our brains are contribute to us really thinking about things in a negative way. It is much easier to go from positive to negative versus going from negative to positive. If something bad happens to you in life, but you realize that that thing wasn't actually true at all, and so you should think about it differently. It is so much harder to go from that negative thing to a positive thing. But if something positive happened to you, it's super easy to turn that thing to a negative, right? So we have to think about it. Our brains are wired that way a lot of times to think of the negative first versus the positive. And so we fear change because when we think about change, we're like, oh my God, something bad is going to happen if I actually change. And that's not always the truth, right? Yeah, sometimes change does bring bad things, but not always. But we always think of that bad first. And then lastly is that you've just lost hope. I think hope is one of those things that I pray that we all can experience in some point in our lives. I think, that a lot of times when we go through something really, really difficult, it is easy to lose hope. We really turn around and say, what's the use of me trying? Because there's no hope. But there can always be hope, right? I think it's interesting because I was talking to somebody the other day, and they said the work that you do has to be hard, especially the work that I do around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And why do you do that work with it being so hard and with the people in this world? There's some people in this world who are just terrible people. It's to be honest, right? Not all people, right? But there are some really, not so great people in this world who believe so not so great things about diversity, equity, and inclusion based on the color of your skin, your religion, your sexual preference and orientation. And I said, the reason why I do this work is because I have hope that things can change. I literally have hope that things can get better. But some of us, we're sitting in a space in our life that you have lost hope. And I want this show to be encouraging to you and to not only be encouraging, but give you some tools and strategies that you can use if you're sitting in that space that you can absolutely overcome. I want to share, a story about you, the story with you that kind of had me stuck for a minute. And it was really, really difficult at the time. And it goes to show that if you kind of stick with some of the things that I'm going to share with you before the show is over, that you can overcome almost anything. But this was a really tough one for me in my life. And so I know some of you know, but a couple years ago, I started on this path to getting my PhD. And my PhD was one of those things that was a lifelong, uh, well, I don't think the PhD itself was a lifelong dream, but just becoming a psychologist has been a lifelong dream of mine. And so I started on this path to get my PhD in business psychology. And I had just had my daughter not that long ago. I think Mackenzie was about one, a little, yeah, about one. Once I started on this, once I started my PhD. So she's about one. So I started my PhD and I'm chugging along and everything is great. I mean, as great as it can be. I always say that I have a very, very colorful life. So, because at the time, I was in my doctorate program. So was my husband in his doctorate program. And we had a toddler or baby in tow. And I was still running my speaking business where I do a lot of leadership, keynotes and stuff like that. So that's why I say my life is super, super colorful. So I'm chugging along. It's already a bit difficult because I got all these other things going on. I'm still trying to run this business. I'm still trying to make sure that I bring in my share of the money in terms of the household, support my husband, all those things. And then I wake up one day feeling miserable. And then I find out that I'm pregnant. Oh my God. So let me just say this. Me and my husband had to go on a journey of in vitro for my daughter to get Mackenzie. We had to go on a whole in vitro journey, and it took us almost 4 years to actually get pregnant and to have Mackenzie. So me thinking that I would get pregnant just natural wasn't even in my thought process. Yes, I've heard it. I've heard so many stories just like this one of, not being able to get pregnant, go through in vitro, finally being able to get pregnant after that. I just wasn't thinking it was going to happen to me. Y'all know how we do. We don't never think the thing is going to happen to us, right? So we don't never think the thing is going to happen. Now, so there were two sides to this. On one side, I am ecstatic that we're about to have our third child, right? Because we have an adult son, Tamazier, who actually has a birthday coming up, y'all. He will be 28 on March the 6th. Woo woo, happy birthday, baby. So so we already had him. We had Mackenzie, and I am the kind of person, I didn't want Mackenzie to grow up by herself, in the sense of, because her and her brother are 22 years in age difference. Yes, we did that thing. 22-year age difference. I didn't want her to grow up by herself. And so having another sibling to me was perfect. Like, and my husband, we wanted two kids. We didn't get blessed with twins, but now this was an opportunity to have another baby, so that my daughter could have a playmate and we could have, just another child. So I'm very, very excited. But on the other hand, I'm like, oh snap. What am I going to do? This is crazy. I got a baby already who's about one, and I'm pregnant, and I'm about to have another child, and I'm in the middle of my PhD process. What the heck? So, so needless to say, I was like, this is about to be interesting. So the thought crossed my mind, um, that I needed to do something, right? What is it that I need to do? Do I need to quit or do I need to take a leave of absence? What do I need to do? And at the moment, I was really stuck. I was stuck because I needed to make a decision in my life as to which direction I was going to go. And I knew that whatever direction I chose was going to affect the future, right? Because I set my eyes on becoming a psychologist. And for me, anytime I set my eyes on anything, it's important for me to actually accomplish that goal. I'm one of those people who can write down a goal and I really want to hit that goal. I'm very goal oriented. That's what makes me a great coach, because I know how to help people get from A to where they want to be, right? And so I was like, oh my God, so if I quit altogether, then my dream of becoming a psychologist is dead. If I take a pause and I just kind of, wait until after I have the baby, that's going to be time. Now you know, I may be rusty when I start back up, right? So it was a fear, if I took a break, that it would be much more difficult to restart my PhD process than what I would want. And so those were those choices, and I really had to think about the direction that I was going to go. And I'm going to talk you through how I did that in the steps that I'm going to tell you, right? In the steps that I'm going to tell you. And so the first step that I'm going to tell you in terms of getting unstuck is that you have to evaluate where you are. If you don't know where you are, then it's going to be super difficult for you to get to where you want to be. So in my case, right, I had to really sit down and evaluate where I am in life. Where was I? I was, first of all, a woman who desired, children. And so I had that in my life, and I was now pregnant. So I had to think about the fact that God had answered prayers in my life. I had to evaluate the fact that, all right, I am in school right now. I am actively pursuing this PhD. I also have a husband who I am committed to, and want to continue, being a great wife and a great partner. I have an older son that I love dearly, and still just really being the mom and supportive to him. I have a 1-year old who needs a lot of my care and a lot of everything. And I was still at the time breastfeeding and all of those things. and then I got school. I got school over here. So I had to put all of that on my plate and ask myself like, oh, okay, this is where I'm at right now. This is all the stuff that I have on my plate. And then ask myself, is it feasible for me to continue to do all these things? So that's step number 2. You got to identify where you want to be. I always say that if you're at A, you got to figure out where you want to be, right? I needed to figure out in life where I wanted to be. What was so important to me in my life that I was willing to do the things necessary to get it. And when I thought about that question, and it's I can ask it in another way for you, right? In terms of coaching, what do you want? Right? I think so many times in life we really think about what other people want for us versus thinking about what we want for ourselves. And I had to sit down, and this is what I always tell you to do: sit down in a quiet place where you have some time to just think. Okay? Think, people. We have to think for ourselves. We have to give ourselves the space and the opportunity to think. For me, that's at 5 o'clock in the morning when I get up in the morning, and I am, away from all, away from everybody else, I have that ability to think. And so I had to sit there and I had to really think about what I wanted out of life. And let me just tell you what I came up with. I wanted, number one, to be the best mom and to be a mom to these beautiful children of mine. And the one that was, growing in my stomach at the time, I really, really did want that. But I also wanted to become a psychologist. And so I often coach women who are already successful, but they want this and that. They want the children and the career. They want the husband and the career. They want the promotion and to be healthy and work out. Like I often coach women and people who want both. And I am a fan of having both. But I also recognize that when you want both, you have to understand that you will more than likely be living an unbalanced life. And unbalanced to me is what's normal. It's normal. I call it the mixed balance approach, meaning at some point in your life, you may be giving more to your job than you are to your children. At some point in your life, you may be giving more to your spouse than you do to your job. Like, you may be giving more to your parents who you're taking care of than you are to your work. Like you may at some point be giving more to yourself and the health that you need than you do to your job, right? There will be a push pull and that's okay, right? So I sat down and I thought about, and the way you do this is you visualize. You visualize where you want to be. And I thought of myself at the end of my PhD being a psychologist and helping tons of people overcome the challenges that they're facing, getting unstuck in their lives, being more resilient, learning to create their own happiness. I thought about all those things and I'm like, yeah, I can't quit. I can't even take a break if I want to do that. And I understand that I'm going to have to be giving and pulling at the same time. And that's okay. Right. And so that is what I had to do. I had to identify where I wanted to be. So do you. When it comes to your goals, right, you have to really evaluate where you are and ask yourself where you want to be. Those are the first 2 steps. And after you do that, I need you to challenge those internal thoughts that you're going to have about it, because those internal thoughts are going to be the things that literally take you out sometimes. Those internal thoughts are going to be those things that push you, and you're going to be like, oh my God, I can't do this. Well, you have to challenge them, And so some of the things that I went through when I was going through this process was mom guilt, right? On those days that I had to leave the house and go to I at the time when I was doing my PhD, I was in WeWork. I damn near lived in WeWork. Okay. Like when I tell you me and WeWork was best buds, we were, because I knew what I needed in that space of my life, and I had to get out of the house in order to do the work. And so I couldn't spend the time that I wanted to with my children because I was doing this dissertation and this PhD, and I was committed to the process. I still was committed to my children and my family, right? But I knew what I was going to have to give. Here's the thing. When you are stuck in a crossroads, when you're stuck in a rut and you really need to get out, you are going to have to understand that this is going to be a give and take. You are going to have to give something to get something. Most of the time we want to get without giving, but you're not. You're not. And it's okay. It's okay to feel that discomfort. It's okay to be unbalanced in your life, right? As long as you're working towards your goal and it's going to get you there and it's going to serve you well, then you're going to be okay, right? I didn't do this in a vacuum. My husband Jamil, Jamil is awesome, right? Although he was doing his own PhD as well, we supported each other. It was a whole life of unbalance and chaos. But we were in it together and we understood what we was trying to do because we both wanted to finish so that we could have a smoother life for the future, right? So you got to challenge those thoughts that pop up. My thoughts were like, oh, because you're missing another birthday party, or you're missing taking the kids to this park, or you couldn't, stay up and watch the movie with the kids, you're a bad mom. Baloney. Baloney, right? I had to realize that I can also be a good mom and carve out what I needed to feel good with my kids and also do this PhD. And that's exactly what I did. You can do and. Yes, it may not be ideal. Like I didn't like missing going to the park. I didn't like missing going to the aquarium or the zoo or wherever the kids were going with their dad or with, their aunties or whatever. I hated missing it, but I understood what I was trying to do and why I was trying to do it. And so I had to challenge those thoughts of not being a good mom because I knew I was a good mom and I knew I loved my children and I knew my values were in the right place for me. And then lastly, you got to take just small steps, right? They don't have to be big steps. When you are stuck, you do not have to take one gigantic, big, huge step. You do not have to take it. A small step is sufficient. It's sufficient. So for me, that small step was, and I mean, some people may think it was a big step, was I registered for the next set of classes for the next semester, right? I went ahead and I registered for those classes. Now, for me, I needed to do that so that I know that I'm going to continue, right? I know that I was going to continue in school. But for others, that might sound like a big step. But whatever it is for you, the step is yours. Nobody else should tell you that the step is big or small. The step is your step, right? Because guess what? We're not comparing ourselves with other people. XYZ did it, well, he did it, she did it. Who cares? This is what you're going to do. What's your next best step? Right? Not the next right step. Because here's the thing. When we peg our mind to think about the next right thing, that can cause what I call analysis paralysis, meaning we analyze it. What is right? Oh, is this right? Right. And so our brain gets stuck in the cycle of like analyzation. But when you think about the next best step, the brain says, oh, well, guess what? Right in the moment, this is the next best step for me. And it kicks you into gear. It kicks you into action, right? That's what the research is letting you know, is that when you think about an action forward step, it kicks you into action. So when you think about the next best step for you, then that kicks you into action. And so you have to figure out what the next small action is. If you are trying to get a raise or whatever, the next best thing for you might be to just write down all the ways that you contribute to the organization so that they may give you a raise, right? So these are the just simple for me, like four things that I did in my life. And let me just tell you, I literally registered for the next semester and I was smooth sailing. And about a year and a half to 2 years, I graduated with my PhD in business psychology. So therefore, I am now what we call Dr. Kiki Ramsey. And it's all because I overcame being stuck. I overcame being stuck with these four steps that I've just shared with you. And so I had a couple questions, right? I put it out on my social media and everything. And I asked you what your questions were around being stuck. And so I had a question from Keisha that came in, I think it's out of Philadelphia. And she says, when it comes to relationships, in terms of getting unstuck, how do you stop the cycle of behaviors? When you continue certain behaviors that emotionally hurt other people, or you are emotionally hurting yourself by not being assertive, how do you get unstuck in behavioral patterns? Keisha, girl, this is a really, 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 really good question. So, our lives, all of our lives, we've been programmed, right? We have been programmed based on the things that have happened to ourselves throughout life. And so I'm programmed a lot of ways to act the way that I act. And that's been from all of the experiences that have happened throughout my life. So a lot of times when we're stuck in some unproductive behaviors, we are programmed to continue to actually do and perform those behaviors. And it only takes a break when we actually it's almost like tricking our mind to first realize the behaviors that we are doing. And then you have to say that this behavior is no longer serving me. So I'm going to stop the behavior because I'm going to be aware of when the behavior is happening in my life and I choose not to do the behavior. A lot of time with us, right? Things are a habit because we continue to do it. Well, how do you break a habit? Is you do the opposite. You do what it is that you want to do versus the behavior that you're doing. It's called the opposite, right? It's called do the opposite. So if you are continuously hurting yourself, and this takes a level of awareness. I always think that a lot of times we are living our lives and we're just not aware. And this is why I love mindfulness, meaning you understand and you are aware and awake and you're not judgmental of everything. That's why I love mindfulness, because you've got to become aware of these behaviors that you're doing. So what you need to do is the opposite, right? Research says that you can train your brain to do the opposite of that behavior when you're doing it. And also it comes into play with thoughts as well. You can train your brain to think the opposite in terms of thoughts. It's not just this rah-rah positive thinking. It's literally training your brain to think about the opposite. So whatever that is, especially when it comes to relationships, if you're hurting other people or if you're hurting yourself, what is the behavior that you want to do? You That behavior may be kind words. That behavior may be acts of kindness, acts of service. So do the opposite. Every single time you either think something negative in this relationship, you say something negative, or you do something negative, I want you to turn that around and do the opposite. And it takes you to continue to do this to create a behavior. Research says that it takes about 66 days to create a habit. I know y'all thought it was 20 days. I know you thought it was 30 days, but that's not the truth. The truth is, it actually takes about 66 days to create a habit in your life. And so when it comes to anything that we're doing consistently that we want to break out of, we want to do the opposite. And I want you to identify what the opposite is for you. And then once you do the opposite, do it for at least 66 days, and then that thing will become a habit. Okay. And so I am so excited that we were able to just kind of dig into this because I know that so many of us get stuck in a rut. But there are ways to get out of that, and they are scientifically proven for you to really be able to overcome that. I hope that this was helpful for you. If it was, please share it. We are on all podcast outlets. So you can find the Dr. Kiki Ramsey Show on your Apple Podcast, on Spotify, on Amazon, on Audible. Any of those podcasts, we are on there. Go ahead and also check out some of the previous episodes. We have some amazing episodes that we've done of the Dr. Kiki Ramsey Show in the past as well. And then if you are a woman who really needs some support from other women, and you are already successful, but you want to learn how to be, live that beautifully unbalanced life while being happy, come on over and join us on the Happy Women Lead Academy. And if you're live with us today, next week we start the 2-day happiness challenge. So hop on over to kikiramsey.com so that you can actually join us on the happiness challenge. Until next time, you all know what to do. Go out there and create your own happiness. Peace.